There comes a time when the body begins to falter, when strength once taken for granted slips quietly away, and when each step feels heavier than the last. Old age brings with it a strange companion, pain. For many, it is an uninvited guest that lingers too long, a shadow that hovers over days once filled with ease. Yet pain, even in old age, is not without meaning. It is not a cruel accident, nor is it merely a reminder of what has been lost. Pain has a hidden purpose, and when we dare to look deeper, it reveals truths the young and strong often cannot see. Pain humbles us. It strips away illusions of self-sufficiency. When youth courses through our veins, we believe ourselves unconquerable, able to bend the world to our will. But when pain comes, it whispers a sobering truth, that we are not infinite, that our strength has limits, that we are creatures dependent on something greater than ourselves. And this humility is not meant to crush us, but to open our eyes to realities beyond flesh and bone. Pain awakens us. It shakes us from the comfort of routine and forces us to ask questions that matter. What is life truly for? What remains when health fades? What endures when all else passes away? In youth, one may run from such questions, drowning them out with noise and distraction. But in the stillness of old age, when pain slows the body, the soul begins to listen. The aches of the body become like tolling bells, calling us to prepare for eternity, reminding us that this world was never meant to be our final home. Pain also purifies, just as fire refines gold. Pain burns away the dross of selfishness, pride, and attachment to things that cannot last. It teaches us patience, endurance, and compassion. One who suffers learns to see the suffering of others more clearly. The heart, softened by its own wounds, becomes more tender toward the wounded. The soul, pressed hard by trials, begins to long not for temporary relief, but for something eternal, unshakable, and true. In this way, pain becomes a teacher, not a gentle teacher, perhaps, but a wise one. Its lessons are not written on the pages of books, but carved into the very experience of life. It tells us what really matters. It turns our gaze from fading pleasures toward enduring joy. And though it hurts, it is not without purpose, for purpose shines through even the cracks of our frailty. Old age, with its pain, is not simply the closing of a story. It is the deepening of it. It is as though life saves its hardest chapters for the end, not to punish, but to complete the narrative. Without pain, there would be no urgency to loosen our grip on what is passing away. Without weakness, there would be no hunger for the strength that does not fade. Without the reminder of our mortality, we would never seek what lies beyond mortality. So when pain comes in old age, let us not see it merely as loss. It is also invitation to humility, to awakening, to purification, to preparation. It whispers that we are nearer to the threshold of eternity, nearer to the place where pain will be no more, nearer to the fullness we have longed for all our lives. Pain in old age may be sharp, but its edge is not without mercy. Hidden within it is purpose, and hidden within that purpose is hope. Pain in old age humbles us, reminding us that we are not self-sufficient but dependent on something greater. Pain in old age humbles us, reminding us that we are not self-sufficient but dependent on something greater. In the years of youth and strength, life often feels like it bends beneath our will. We rise in the morning with energy. We walk with steady steps. We dream of futures that seem limitless, and we imagine that our power will never fade. But as the years gather, the body begins to speak a different language, one that cannot be ignored, one written in the aches of the joints, the trembling of the hands, and the weariness of the bones. Pain enters the story and reminds us that the illusion of complete control was never real. We are not masters of our own destiny in the way we once believed, and the humbling that comes with pain is not a cruel blow, but a necessary awakening. It strips away the pride that blinds us, the pride that says we can build our own towers to heaven and secure our own meaning. When weakness touches us, we see more clearly that we were never meant to carry the weight of existence alone. The humbling power of pain is strange, for it is not simply about limitation but about revelation. To be humbled is to be shown reality as it truly is. Pain tears down the curtain that youth so easily pulls across the truth. It teaches us that no matter how much we plan, accumulate, or achieve, our strength has boundaries. The world does not orbit our desires. Even the breath in our lungs, the pulse in our veins, the clarity of our thoughts, none of these are entirely within our command. Old age, coupled with pain, exposes the fragility we had long ignored, and in that exposure, a deeper wisdom begins to rise. When pain humbles us, it is not simply to diminish us, but to free us from illusions. We often believe dependence is weakness, but true weakness is found in the arrogance of believing we need nothing beyond ourselves. Pain forces us to lean on others, to accept help, to soften the heart that once resisted vulnerability. An old man leaning on a cane, an old woman reaching out for support. These images are not signs of failure, but of reality embraced. Through pain, we discover that to be human is to be interwoven with others, to be sustained by something greater, to acknowledge that our lives are not entirely our own making. Pain humbles us in another way, too. It forces us to let go of the small gods we once served. In strength, people worship success, beauty, recognition, or possessions. But when the body falters and pain becomes a companion, these idols lose their grip. They cannot comfort, they cannot heal, they cannot answer the deeper cries of the heart. Pain makes clear the emptiness of such pursuits, and in that clarity lies a chance to turn to what is real, to what endures. It is not a comfortable lesson, but it is a necessary one. Humility is born not when everything goes our way, but when life confronts us with our limitations and we bow before truths larger than ourselves. There is also a hidden mercy in the way pain humbles. The proud heart often resists correction, resists the gentle nudges of conscience, resists the whispers of eternity. But pain has a way of speaking with authority. It does not politely ask for our attention, it demands it. It brings us to our knees, sometimes literally, and in that posture of weakness, we are better positioned to see what we could not see before. The noise of ambition quiets, the rush of busyness slows. In that silence, the soul begins to listen. Pain becomes a doorway through which humility enters, and humility opens the way to wisdom. This humbling is not only personal, but relational. One who suffers learns to see differently. The proud gaze that once looked down on the weak begins to soften. Pain levels us, making us realize that no matter our station in life, no matter our achievements, we are fragile creatures subject to the same decline. The humbled heart becomes gentler, kinder, more understanding. It knows the cry of weakness and therefore hears it in others. Pain, by humbling us, weaves threads of compassion we would never have chosen for ourselves, but which make us richer in spirit. Old age often feels like a stripping away, and pain magnifies that stripping. The strength that once defined us is taken away. The independence we cherished becomes harder to maintain. Yet this is not the destruction of identity, but the unveiling of it. Pain humbles us into remembering that we are not defined by what we can accomplish with our strength, but by the truth of who we are beneath it. It reveals that our value is not tied to our vigor but to our essence. It humbles us into acknowledging that life has always been gift, not achievement, that each breath has always been borrowed, not earned. Pain is relentless in its honesty. It will not allow us to pretend forever that we are invincible. The humbling it brings may sting, but in that sting lies a peculiar kind of grace. For only when we let go of illusions of self-sufficiency can we truly open our hands to receive what has always been offered to us. Pain dismantles the fortress of pride, stone by stone, until we stand in the open, exposed yet ready to be filled with something greater than ourselves. And though it comes clothed in suffering, its work is to lead us away from the tyranny of self and into the freedom of truth. Pain awakens us to deeper questions of life, eternity, and what truly matters beyond the fading body. Pain awakens us to deeper questions of life, eternity, and what truly matters beyond the fading body. For much of life, we walk with a sense of permanence, as if the days will stretch on without end, as if tomorrow will always be waiting for us. In youth, when strength is steady and the future feels vast, such illusions are easy to believe. The concerns of the moment, ambition, possessions, reputation, comfort rise so high in our vision that we rarely look past them. But pain, especially the kind that accompanies old age, disrupts that illusion. It slows the steps, bends the back, and brings silence where once there was noise. In that slowing, in that aching, the questions we once avoided begin to rise. What is the purpose of life? What lies beyond this brief existence? What is worth holding onto when everything else slips away? Pain awakens the soul to realities we have long pushed aside. There is something sharp and unignorable about pain. Unlike pleasure, which can be fleeting and easily forgotten, pain seizes the attention. It does not allow us to drift aimlessly. It pricks the mind and stirs the spirit. A person in pain cannot remain satisfied with shallow answers. The body cries out, and the heart begins to echo that cry, searching for meaning that goes deeper than the surface comforts of the world. In this way, pain acts as a messenger, forcing us to confront questions that comfort could never compel us to ask. In the quiet hours of the night, when sleep is broken by discomfort, the soul begins to wander into thoughts often left unexamined. What is the worth of all I have gathered? What remains of the years I have lived? What awaits me when this fragile body finally lays itself down? These are not questions of despair, but of awakening. Pain awakens us by stripping away the illusions that kept us distracted, illusions that promised permanence where there was none. It reveals the truth that life is brief, fragile, and precious. This awakening can feel harsh, yet it is one of the greatest gifts pain can bring, because without it we might never consider what is eternal. There is also a way that pain awakens the senses to the reality of time. When days of health were plentiful, hours slipped by unnoticed. But when pain becomes a companion, each hour is weighed more carefully. We see how precious time truly is, how every moment carries value. This awakening stirs gratitude for the smallest of mercies. A breath of fresh air, the warmth of sunlight, the smile of a loved one. Pain, though it narrows the strength of the body, often broadens the vision of the soul. It awakens us to what has been overlooked and teaches us to treasure what is real. Pain awakens not only gratitude but longing. The body reminds us constantly of its weakness, and in that reminder, the heart begins to look for strength that does not fade. When everything earthly shows itself fragile, the soul turns its gaze upward, searching for permanence. Pain awakens the eternal hunger placed deep within us, a hunger that no possession, no achievement, no fleeting joy could ever satisfy. It makes us restless for more than this passing world, for more than bodies that fail, for more than years that vanish like mist. Pain awakens the desire for what is unchanging, for what is everlasting. It is easy to live an entire life asleep to these questions. One can build a career, raise a family, gather wealth, and still never truly ask what endures. But pain has a way of shaking us, of opening our eyes to truths we would rather ignore. It asks us to consider, what will matter when strength is gone, when health is taken, when the last chapter of life arrives? The awakening it brings is not comfortable, but it is necessary. For without awakening, we would live only for shadows, chasing things that slip through our fingers, blind to the reality of eternity pressing upon us. This awakening also changes how we see others. Pain makes us notice suffering we once passed by. It awakens compassion, for when we have tasted hardship, we recognize it in the faces of those around us. The heart becomes less concerned with shallow judgments and more attuned to the deep humanity shared by all. Pain awakens us to the truth that every person is fragile, that every person carries unseen burdens, and that kindness is far more important than pride or ambition. The suffering of the body stirs the awakening of the soul to love more deeply, to forgive more quickly, and to hold on to bitterness less tightly. Awakening through pain also shifts how we measure our lives. In youth, worth is often calculated in accomplishments or possessions. But in old age, under the weight of pain, such measures seem hollow. The awakening of the soul recognizes that love matters more than recognition, that faithfulness matters more than success, that the legacy of kindness matters more than the trophies of ambition. Pain peels away the scales from our eyes, showing us what will truly endure beyond the passing of time. In this sense, pain becomes an alarm bell not meant to torment but to rouse. It calls us from sleep, from distraction, from illusions that would waste our lives. It urges us to awaken to eternity, to live with the knowledge that this life is not the whole story but only the beginning. And though this awakening may come wrapped in suffering, it is a mercy to be stirred before the final moment arrives. For the greatest tragedy would not be pain itself, but to live and die without ever having been awakened to the truth of what really matters. Pain purifies the soul, shaping patience, compassion, and longing for what is eternal. Pain purifies the soul, shaping patience, compassion, and longing for what is eternal. When the body weakens and discomfort becomes a constant presence, life feels stripped of many of its distractions. The amusements and busyness that once filled the days are no longer possible in the same way, and pain presses the mind to confront itself honestly. In this pressure, something begins to take shape. Just as metal is placed into fire to burn away impurities and to reveal its true strength, the soul under the weight of pain begins to shed the unnecessary and uncover what is most essential. Pain does not simply remind us of limitation. It becomes a refining tool, carving away pride, impatience, and vanity, leaving behind a heart that knows how to endure, how to love, and how to desire what endures forever. Patience is often the first fruit of this refining. In youth and health, waiting is difficult. We crave immediate results, quick relief, and fast solutions. But when pain lingers, when hours feel heavy and nights stretch long, the soul learns a slower rhythm. It discovers that waiting can be endured, that endurance itself carries meaning, that strength is not always shown in swift victory, but often in quiet persistence. Pain teaches the discipline of patience by forcing the soul to rest in what it cannot change and to trust that meaning exists even in the waiting. This patience is not born of passivity, but of strength forged in suffering, a strength that accepts hardship without surrendering to despair. Alongside patience, compassion begins to grow. Those who have never suffered may glance at another's hardship and quickly move on, unable to grasp the weight of invisible burdens. But one who has endured pain carries a new tenderness, a gentleness toward others whose lives are marked by sorrow or struggle. The memory of personal suffering softens the heart, making it less quick to judge and more eager to comfort. Compassion rises from the soil of shared humanity, from the realization that all are fragile, all are vulnerable, and all stand in need of mercy. Pain breaks the illusion of superiority, reminding us that we are no better than the weakest among us. In this humbling recognition, the soul becomes more generous with its kindness, more attentive to the cries of others, more willing to bear another's load. Pain also purifies by teaching detachment from what cannot last. The comforts of life, strength, beauty, possessions, achievements, shine brightly in the days of health, but when pain strips them away, their temporary nature becomes undeniable. What once seemed essential begins to look small. The longings of the heart shift from temporary pleasures to deeper needs, from fleeting satisfactions to lasting hope. Pain reveals the fragility of the world and awakens the soul to the reality that nothing here can fully satisfy. This awakening produces a longing for what is beyond, for a joy untouched by decay, for a peace that pain cannot reach. It purifies desire itself, directing it away from illusions and toward what is eternal. In this way, suffering becomes not only a burden but a teacher. It whispers truths that comfort never could. In moments of sharp weakness, the soul learns to treasure strength not its own. In times of loneliness brought by pain, the soul recognizes the value of presence and love. In the stripping away of illusions, the soul begins to desire what no shadow can dim. This purification is not easy, but it is profound, for it leaves the soul marked with qualities that shine brighter than anything gained in ease. Even character is reshaped by pain's refining fire. A proud person may become humble, a restless person may become still, a selfish person may become generous. The transformation is not instant but gradual, like metal heated over time until it bends into a new form. Pain exposes the cracks in the soul and then presses the heart to change. It forces one to confront hidden fears, buried resentments, and unspoken longings, and through this confrontation, it creates the possibility of release. The soul that emerges is often gentler, wiser, and more attuned to what really matters. The longing for eternity that pain produces is perhaps its deepest work. When every day brings reminders of mortality, the soul cannot help but look beyond. This longing is not mere escape from hardship but recognition of truth, that the human spirit was made for more than temporary pleasure, more than fragile health, more than a few fleeting years. Pain makes this longing urgent, turning the eyes away from what cannot endure and fixing them on what lies beyond time. The ache of the body becomes a mirror for the greater ache of the soul, an ache for completion, for lasting joy, for union with the eternal. Pain purifies by teaching surrender. It breaks the illusion of control, reminding us that our lives were never entirely in our hands. In this surrender, peace can be found, not in the removal of pain, but in the acceptance of a higher purpose at work within it. This surrender is not defeat but refinement, the quiet strength of a soul that trusts in the midst of struggle. It is the yielding of self that allows transformation to take place, the release of pride that opens the way for truth to enter. Thus, pain is not meaningless. It purifies by pressing us into patience, by softening us into compassion, by lifting our desires toward eternity. It carves away illusions, reshapes character, and deepens the soul's longing for what no suffering can take away. It is a hard teacher, but its lessons are written in permanence, etched deep into the heart, preparing it for joys beyond the reach of decay.